Nintendo's got a really good thing going right now. Switch 1 was this big success. The banger games, the more ideal situation coming off the heels of the Wii U, the features, the library, the volume, the support of the third parties and indies, all that amazing stuff. And it seems to be continuing with the Switch 2's existence. We just had an amazing direct, amazing games shown off, loads of third-party support, and a lot of those third parties are also amazing games, also coming at launch. Neat features and novelties unique to the Switch 2, and plenty of other stuff. They've got a strong hype train rolling. A lot of high praises, a lot of support after that direct. We're in this very huge, celebratory, momentous occasion, both for the company and Nintendo fans alike. It should be. Still kinda is. But man, there just had to be that one thing that just sours the mood. And the thing is, it technically wasn't even related to the Nintendo Direct. They didn't tell us this piece until after the Direct was over. And I get the strong feeling Nintendo knew. They shouldn't have said it during the Direct. They knew this decision wasn't going to go over well. Sure, they might have not wanted to distract everyone from the colorful, fun games and whatnot. We don't know how recent or early this decision was made, whether a week ago, months, years ago, we don't know. But they did have this idea of just not saying it until after for some reason. Because of all the amazing games and announcements to come out of that Direct, this quite literally is the one thing that's dampening the mood for everyone. It's really the one rotten egg spoiling the whole carton, the canker in the rose, the bad apple spoiling the whole bunch. No, it doesn't take away from the amazing games for the most part. I'm very much a part of the problem. I love Mario Kart. I love Donkey Kong. I am one of those quote-unquote hardcore Nintendo enthusiasts. I was doomed from the start when they showed Mario Kart and the Switch 2 to begin with. I'm gonna get this thing day one. But it's not just about me here. And for as much as I love these fictional series, doesn't mean it's always hunky-dory, no matter what, from the same company that makes these games. Something's amiss to me. I'm gonna talk about that. The big thing that everyone's upset about. Not the console's price, but the prices for the games for Switch 2. Mario Kart World, phenomenal looking Mario Kart, is currently priced at $79.99 USD, $80. And to make matters worse, some retailers are also suggesting there might be a split between digital and physical prices for games, with physical games being $10 more. So there's even a possibility Mario Kart World and other Switch 2 games could wound up being $90 for physical owners. There is also another whole thing that some Switch 2 games will also only include a download key, pretty much. Game key cards, it's this thing that'll allow you to access the download for games like a key, but they won't have the actual game data on the card, which double sucks. I think Switch 1 has something like this as well, but the extent of this on Switch 2, still unknown. But the fact Nintendo's likely pushing consumers to purchase digitally when we've seen plenty of companies successfully undownload and remove games from people's digital libraries. Concord was a whole thing, it sucked, but Sony managed to pull that off with that game. That's still a very foolish move. I feel that's now not out of the realm of possibility for Nintendo to do, which sucks, man. Yeah, it's a really bad move. Why would Nintendo want to do something like that? But none of us expected Nintendo to raise the prices of their games up to $80 or $90 either. So now, you can't rule anything out with this company. No matter how bad it may seem, no matter how out of character it would seem, which is unfortunate. Now, the main expectation people had going into the Switch 2 Direct, a solid buff in hardware, but the price was going to be more or less $400. That was the mindset of basically everyone, including me. It's a reasonable, fair price for a better Switch with more under the hood, nothing too crazy, but we wound up getting a lot more. More specs, stronger hardware and whatnot, but also bigger price. And that just wound up making the games themselves more expensive on top. If not upset, the vast majority of people are at least really thrown off, like a genuine whiplash moment, because both the Direct going so swimmingly, amazing games, but also Nintendo choosing not to tell us during the Direct or build up the idea at all prior. To me, others immediately thought this too. My first initial thought as to why so expensive for any Switch 2 game to be $80 or $90 is the world right now. Economics, Precedent shifting tariffs and policies on imported goods, stuff in the entertainment space pretty much getting more expensive than usual. But Japan, Europe, and Canada also got hit with the price increases for Switch 2 specifically as well. The system's still really expensive there. The economy's bonked here in the US and Japan, but it's not just us. Japan also has like a region-locked version of the Switch 2 they could buy for effectively $330 USD. The normal, multi-language, non-region locked, just regular Switch 2. Still around $450, 470 USD in Japan. I don't know the exact yen for that. If it was that bad, the Switch 2 would be closer to $500 over here. So I don't think it was just that alone. On some level, it probably affected Nintendo's strategy, but the core reason, the biggest reason, no, I don't think it was that. It's all speculation, but I don't think it was the tariffs, as everyone else is saying. My second thought was also just how Nintendo's really upping their game in terms of developing hardware. The Switch 1 to the Switch 2, the transition between the two consoles, Nintendo's main systems, they pretty much went from being a portable PS3, basically, to a PS4 Pro. The 4K, 120 frames, 256 gigabytes of storage, the HDR lighting and all that. It's pretty much a Nintendo system on the level of a PS4 Pro. It's finally a modern Nintendo system. That's cool. Amazing. Awesome. I don't think that's the point in this. I think plenty of people will validly say, it's a little steep still, and I understand, but I think most people will at least largely understand it's semi-reasonable at least. $450 I think was the absolute highest price they could possibly go. And we're getting genuinely big upgrades from Switch 1 to Switch 2. But the console itself isn't even the problem here. It's the fact even with the buff and hardware, Nintendo's just immediately hard increasing the prices of their games. The games specifically, and it's not like Nintendo never steered from selling their games more or even less in most cases than $60 outside of one specific game. Their competition that has stronger hardware while having several cases of selling games for $70 still has plenty of games sell for $60 anyways at most. Plus, it's not like Nintendo really properly set people up for increasing the prices of their games, and especially by this much. Tears of the Kingdom was Nintendo's first and only $70 game on Switch, only 2 years ago. Every Switch game before and after, they just stuck with $60. There was a whole discussion surrounding Tears of the Kingdom being $70, the precedent that's set. And while it at least made sense relative to Tears of the Kingdom and its quality, and Nintendo stating it wasn't going to be a common occurrence, it's funny in a messed up way, just looking back on how that whole conversation happens. Some people were uber skeptical, most were just kinda letting it lie. I kind of forgot about it too. And now the first Switch 2 game is going all the way up to $80, and $80 just for the digital version. There's even a chance the physical enthusiasts are going to have to pay even more money than that just to say they objectively own it. And there may even be some releases from first and third parties that won't even truly get a physical version and might still cost $90. I'm sorry, man. It doesn't matter how I feel about the system or its games. That is some turbo ass, genuine dog shit. That is a really arrogant move Nintendo's making, I feel. It's unironically greedy. It's genuinely greedy. And I wouldn't be highlighting how inappropriate or uncomfortable it feels if I didn't just feel it's not right. But like I said, quite literally everyone on every platform comments under my videos, other YouTubers' videos, forums, discussions, podcasts, everyone, everywhere is really not happy in any way, shape, or form about the idea of Switch 2 titles in general, especially the core, big, first parties, being even remotely close to $100 a price. It's not a good look no matter how you slice it. Like, imagine being a kid, asking your mom to buy you an $80 game. That's not happening. If your birthday's close or your Christmas is close, sure. That's not happening, man. Come on. And there's also a whole crowd of people, and those just trying to bring inflation into the argument, or trying to justify Nintendo or the quality of the games on Switch 2 themselves, whether or not they are worth $80 or more. And let's be brutally fair right now. Compared to the mid-2000s with the PS2, the first Xbox, and the GameCube, right? All three companies' standard prices for their games then was around $50, most games. You adjust for inflation to today, it's basically the equivalent of paying $87+ today. Same for $60 games in the late 2000s and early 2010s, with games sold on the PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, the Wii, the Wii U. Adjust for inflation, you get the same thing. The overall value is more or less the same across most generations when you factor inflation. But I genuinely believe that's irrelevant to the reasons why. It's ultimately a net negative for Nintendo to entertain the idea, especially when us and you, the consumer, we're getting half, a third, a quarter, a fifth, etc. We're consistently getting less value in our money over time because of inflation and because the work economy trying to build financial stability in this day and age is just getting harder and harder. It's just a very sudden change Nintendo pulled out of nowhere, for starters. It's a very steep cost even for them, and these companies still have the power to just strip you of your purchases. Plus, it's not like the average financial situation for the consumer, once again, is getting better. Even when the economy's borked in multiple countries, stuff's just getting more and more expensive everywhere. While living wages and financial incomes for the vast majority of people in the whole world are not improving at all. They're just staying the same while everything else is worth more, making their situations and incomes just worse overall and worth less. Companies adjusting for inflation, it's just them making up for lost revenue. It's trying to appease shareholders, avoid big problems related to them, a lot of money, unchecked capitalism. It's unfair and BS no matter how you try to slice it. This shouldn't just be the consumer's fault for having a problem with being forced to shell out more money for a luxury that ultimately doesn't even have to be that expensive to begin with. On top of that, $80 is not that common at all for prices you get from their competition or other publishers on other systems. A lot of them, Sony, Microsoft, EA, Activision, Ubisoft, Square Enix, Bethesda, Rockstar, etc. They have plenty of games priced at $70. The first-party Sony and first-party Sony games, usually $70. And there's been plenty of pushback related to the overall value of said games not equating to that much. Maybe less with Sony, it's mainly with the third-party companies. There are plenty of games on PC over $80, but plenty of them either don't sell, are received poorly, both related and unrelated to the exorbitant price, or both. And even then, those publishers who tag lower quality games at $70 wind up forcing to make those games go on sale months later just because people will buy it. That's clearly the line in the sand that'll make consumers really think if they want to make the purchase or not. $70 seems like to be the limit, and it's not worked out for most companies and publishers who've tried to go that high unless the game priced that high is a genuine banger, and even that's a steep, slippery slope, 9 times out of 10. Like, most consumers aren't stupid. They can easily pick apart the shovelware, the AI garbage, or cheap games on storefronts. Yet, Nintendo only does one $70 game, now mostly $70 to $80, maybe even $90 games. It's already kind of eyebrow-raising. Switch 2 Welcome Tour, this tech demo they showed off in the Direct, is a paid, digital-only game, not packed in with Switch 2, it literally just shows off the features for the console. We cannot expect that game to sell well at all if it's even $60, let alone $70 or higher. That should have been the foreshadow, low-key. But as far as the major players in the console gaming space, Nintendo's the first to really try and crack past an $80 price tag. And because Nintendo was so successful last gen and the Switch 2, even with this has odds of selling well regardless, I really think this is going to set a really bad precedent for them and other companies going forward. I love the games this company puts out, but it shouldn't warrant taking a bad practice on the chin, just taking it lying down. If we've seen time and time again, corporations turning 180s and stopping bad decisions because their consumers are like, hey, that's stupid. Stop. Don't do that, please. When the consumer lets them know when they're doing a shitty idea and they explain why it's a shitty idea. And this one is one of the biggest reasons why. We're going to see more games on average across the board with every other publisher be this ridiculously higher price, especially when Nintendo historically was the cheapest option of the big three. And there's a good chance it'll work for Nintendo. And when you factor their first-party output might being really expensive, Nintendo might wind up being the most expensive option in the long haul now. Microsoft's got no exclusives, just third parties and Game Pass on their systems. Sony's still lacking in exclusives, but the few they do have are great games. They still have loads of third-party support, and their consoles are often utilized for other commodities, and both Microsoft and Sony's consoles are getting cheaper the longer they're out on the market. The PS5 Pro, to me, piss poor sell. Not worth the upgrade at all. But you could get the normal PS5 with all the pros I just listed off for pretty much the same price as Switch 2, even cheaper in half the stores you can find near you at least. Trying to claim whether these games are genuinely worth the value of $80 or not, subjectively, is irrelevant. I could say the exact same thing about the vast majority of Switch 1 games. Smash Ultimate even without the DLC, Mario Odyssey, Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, Luigi's Mansion 3, Thousand Year Door, Brothership, Metroid Dread, likely Metroid Prime 4, etc. Literally, all of us can just list any Switch game and say, it's worth $80, it's worth $100 or more, for a million reasons. Sheer content quantity, content and design quality. Switch 1 has that, and those games are still $60. Sony and Microsoft and many third-party companies and indies have the same in high quality and quantity, and their games, some priced at $70, plenty of games still priced at $60 as well, plenty even less. This generation, last generation, the generation before that, the generation before that, including Nintendo. Nintendo's competition, not perfect, don't get me wrong, they've given games of plenty of quality that are either priced at $60 or less. Their competition systems are cheaper, technically, compared to the Switch 2, and those same consoles that have been out for a while are likely still more powerful than the Switch 2, despite being older. This stunt has just been a very bad PR move. It's blatantly greedy. The idea Nintendo's trying to phase out physical games like every other company, some who have even said, I think it was Ubisoft who said this, some dude behind there, we need to get comfortable with the idea of not owning games we buy. Horrible. Horrible statement, horrible mindset, horrible practice. This encourages the other companies of following their strategy, marking up prices even higher, and risks selling less for being too high for consumers to handle. Spread out the high prices across lower quality games more often, and it also just stings really bad, because Nintendo was always the cheapest option, and now that might as well should be gone. People are barely used to the $70 price tag. They're barely used to it. Nintendo entertaining that price and really making them an occasional case with the big first-party games, it would have been fine. That genuinely would have, for most people, it would have been fine. That would have been the limit. It wouldn't be super common and widespread. Nintendo said, too, they wanted to make it a case-by-case basis type thing. Tears of the Kingdom was the only game they had priced that high on Switch. Donkey Kong Bananza being $70. Ironically, unironically, when I just said people are barely used to $70 games, I don't think would have been a big problem in the end if they just kept that price to the larger scale, big AAA first-party titles. Mario Kart World, maybe not as easy to stomach if Donkey Kong and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom were the only ones. Would have been a lot easier to stomach than $80, I can tell you that much. And pretty much every console generation where they lagged behind, Nintendo's always focused on and thrived by doing weird shit that separated them from Sony and Microsoft. Motion controls, portability, lower price. You had great games on these systems, but they were affordable, and the ones that really sold well had both great games and great appeal for the console. The Wii, the DS, the Switch, the NES, SNES, etc. That was one of their strengths. That was always one of the reasons why they bounced back whenever they fell down, and whenever they ran with a lead over the other two companies. They always had to do something big, appealing, or interesting to get people's attention, while still being able to convince people they are the best option that'll injure your wallet the least. They always marketed themselves by not comparing themselves to the competition, even though it's literally impossible to truly not compare with the other two biggest players in the space. This steep pricing just inherently forces you to compare to your competition. And now I think it's just going to encourage people to steer away from Switch 2. Not to mention the fact we're trying to steer away from comparing ourselves to the other competitors. This is the first Nintendo console where it is like the most iterative out of all of them. Just straight Switch 2. The handhelds were iterative, sure, but pretty much the only other players who had iterative consoles were the only other two big players who stuck it out as long as they did for the last 2 decades. And one of the big features is 4K, higher frame rate. The same type of big features and updates you would get from the next big console on Sony or Microsoft's end. Yeah, what are you going to do whenever you make a new system? You kind of have to do that. That's not everything the Switch 2 is offering either. You get my point. We're actively seeing people disinterested in Switch 2, just steering away, not wanting to buy the thing anymore. All because we might be seeing Nintendo potentially getting too big for their britches again. Nintendo might just want to see what they could get away with, as we've seen from them and other companies, and I just don't want to go through that again, man. We always see with every major company, they get an upswing in sales, popularity, quality, press, reviews, etc. And then they pull some stupid bullshit. They bog down their momentum, they impede the sales and the quality, they make even more stupid decisions, and they have to circle back around with having very bad sales, very bad PR, not a lot of support, and then they just have to make more consumer-friendly decisions with their audience just so they could build the goodwill back up again and maybe sell their current or next system well again. I lived through the Wii U. That shit was awful. That was not fun. I remember when the PS3 was originally $600 back in the day. Sony fans were pissed. They were so pissed, dude. And then they finally lowered the price. And then the PS3 started to sell. It just feels like this ego-driven decision that feels out of character for Nintendo until you look at the bigger picture or just their overall history. They made a boatload of money with the Switch when it was reasonably priced, and especially when Switch 1 games never went on sale and when they always stayed at $60. That standard for them, now it's going to clash and ripple directly with this new Mario Kart and more Switch 2 games being priced $80 to $90, which is really disappointing. And you would think that would mean Nintendo has to lean more on putting their Switch 2 games on sale more, but they haven't done that for Switch 1 pretty much. And as long as they're supporting both systems, they have to put both systems games on sales almost at the same time pretty much. And that is, I could bet both my nuts that is not happening. That's definitely not happening at all. They held on to this information until after the Direct, and I'm almost 100% positive they knew the reaction would not be positive. And they know they can get away with it too. Mario Kart World is the big app for Switch 2 for the year. Everyone's going to be playing that. And Mario Kart, above every other IP they have under their belt, is their absolute biggest cash cow. It's the same how people are speculating and assuming GTA 6 is going to be $100. Because we know Rockstar can and likely will 100% do it and get away with it. Because GTA is just that massive. Mario Kart World on top of the Switch 2 will almost cost $550. For a Nintendo system, that's wild to me. Mario Kart World has a lot of ideas and content at play. It looks like a polished and excellent first-party Nintendo game, excellent Mario Kart game. The point is, it sounds like it's not going to be isolated to just Mario Kart's price tag, and it's just an unreasonable markup that'll set a negative precedent for consumers of the space over an anti-consumer practice, and nothing about the practice is really that justifiable or worth pretending. It's not going to be negative in any way, because 100% it will be. And I'm only saying all of this too, because if you couldn't tell, I love the shit out of the franchises under this company. I've been following Nintendo since the GameCube, and I never really left. I've been through the ups and downs of the Wii, the Wii U, the DS, the 3DS, the GameCube, the Switch. I would much rather the company I'm interested in the most not cycle back to making out-of-touch anti-consumer decisions that alienate their audiences again and risk greater odds their output and quality of their products I like suffer because of one decision they didn't fully think through that can easily chain into multiple haphazard decisions. I specify this too, because you're going to get inherent blind supporters regardless fight back against whatever they do. You have to take and understand the criticism if they understand what's at stake, what the situation is. If the critic not even just has the best interest in the party they're critiquing, or the consumers, or the people involved, but if the critique is reasonable and logical, and it's meant to steer you and everyone involved on a better, more constructive path. This doesn't feel logical, or constructive in almost any way. All it feels logical towards is the money. Nintendo's a business. I've known that since the past decade. Switch 1 managed to be super affordable and majorly successful and profitable for this business, in part because of that, and while not super cheap with its own game prices, sure, Switch was still the biggest branch in Nintendo's largest success in its history by far, despite its shortcomings. They could still make profitable business in the most profitable way possible, without basically spitting in the consumers' faces out of nowhere, which is what it feels like. Especially if they go through with $70 as the lower price going forward. I can't even imagine $60 being the lower price, but that's probably what's going to happen. I genuinely hope all of you understand Nintendo has low-key zero room to bitch about piracy anymore. They're doing that to themselves at this point, now more than ever. You do know that, right? But, yeah, it's very unfortunate. Whether or not you factor inflation, or shareholders, unchecked capitalism, all that bullshit, it just sucks, dude. You can't really blame people for being pissed about it. Because it makes sense. It makes pretty easy sense. I'm kind of stuck expecting every first-party game to be at least $70 now. Third parties can still be too. I'm gotta expect that too. God. Yeah. Out of everything in that Direct, a lot of banger announcements and trailers, but really unfortunate. This is the one thing, probably We got a new DK game, and yet it's ironic. This is like the biggest monkey's paw I think they've ever done. In a hot minute. In a really good while. I think this is probably one of the biggest ones. Do you care about the $90, $80 price tag for Mario Kart and other first parties? Or even the $70 one for Donkey Kong Bananza? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Or even the Switch 2's price. Alright, I'll go back to being happy about Nintendo games again. I am gonna get Mario Kart and Donkey Kong Bananza. Dude, those games look so good. Oh my god. Mario Kart's up next. Thank you for watching. Stay super.
Yo, hey, 妹妹，嘿，我来呀！不不，共和大哈哈呀！拉面，嘿，来面，来个面，共和再见呀！哈哈，拉面，烫手面，谢谢。